The rain came down in sheets so thick Elena Morrison could barely see the driveway through the windshield. 9 months pregnant, her belly pressing against the steering wheel, she fumbled with her keys as another contraction rippled through her abdomen. Not now. Please, not now. The house she'd called home for 3 years stood dark except for one light burning in the master bedroom. Their bedroom. Except it wasn't theirs anymore, was it? Not since Cassandra Vale had started leaving her things scattered across the bathroom counter, her expensive perfume lingering in the air like a territorial claim. Elena's phone buzzed. Another text from her father's chief of staff. Governor Morrison is trying to reach you. Please call when you can. She silenced it. The last thing she needed right now was her father's concern, his questions about why she'd missed their weekly dinner. How could she explain that her husband, Marcus Harrison, had made it perfectly clear she was no longer welcome at his side during important social functions? That the tech millionaire who'd swept her off her feet with promises of forever had decided a 29-year-old pregnant wife was bad for his image. The front door should have been unlocked. Marcus knew she had an appointment at the hospital today for her final checkup before the due date. But when Elena tried the handle, it didn't budge. She pressed the doorbell, one hand bracing her lower back where the pain was building with alarming intensity. Nothing. She tried her key. The lock had been changed. Marcus. Elena pounded on the door, rain soaking through her maternity dress, plastering her dark hair to her face. Marcus, please. I'm in labor. Upstairs, a curtain moved. Through the bedroom window, Elena saw 2 figures silhouetted against the light. Marcus, tall and lean in the expensive pajamas she'd given him last Christmas. And Cassandra, petite and perfect in what looked like one of Elena's silk robes. The window opened 6 inches. Marcus's voice drifted down, cold and detached. Elena, you can't keep doing this. The dramatics are getting old. I'm not being dramatic. Another contraction seized her, and she gripped the doorframe. The baby's coming. Please, just let me in so I can get my hospital bag, the hospital bag you supposedly packed 3 weeks ago? Marcus's laugh was cruel. Funny how you always seem to have an emergency right when I have plans. Elena felt ice spread through her chest despite the cold rain. Plans? Marcus, our baby is being born. What plans could possibly? Cassandra and I are leaving for Cabo in the morning. He said it simply, as if discussing a business trip. Her mother's villa. 2 weeks, no interruptions. I've already told you this needed to be a clean break, Elena. You agreed to the divorce. I agreed to talk about it after the baby was born. Elena's voice cracked. You said we'd try counseling. You promised. I promised a lot of things before I understood what I really needed. Cassandra's hand appeared on Marcus's shoulder, possessive and deliberate. Elena, you're a smart woman. Surely you can see this isn't working. Marcus needs someone who understands his world, his ambitions. Not someone who wants to trap him? Elena stared up at them, rain and tears mixing on her face. We planned this pregnancy. He begged me to start a family. People change, Marcus said flatly. I've changed. What I needed at 35 isn't what I need at 38. Cassandra makes me feel young again, alive again. You make me feel. He paused, searching for the word. Obligated. The cruelty of it stole Elena's breath. 3 years of marriage, of supporting him through the IPO that made him wealthy, of believing in his vision when investors had doubted. And she made him feel obligated. Please. She was begging now, her pride abandoned in the parking lot along with her dignity. Just my bag. Just let me get my things and I'll go. But the baby, Marcus, please, think about your child. My attorney will be in touch about paternity testing and custody arrangements. Marcus started to close the window. The DNA results will determine my level of involvement. Until then, I'd appreciate if you'd stop showing up at my property making scenes. Your property? Elena's voice rose despite the pain racking her body. I live here. My name is on the deed. Actually, it isn't. Cassandra leaned into view, her smile sharp and satisfied. Marcus had the title transferred last week. Something about protecting his assets during the divorce proceedings. I'm sure your lawyer can explain the details. The window slammed shut. The curtains closed. The light went out, leaving Elena standing in the rain and darkness, 9 months pregnant and locked out of her own home. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Elena stumbled down the porch steps, her vision blurring. Her phone was in her purse in the car. She needed to call someone. The hospital. An ambulance. Someone who would help her because her husband had just made it clear he'd rather watch her give birth in a storm than interrupt his vacation plans with his mistress. She was halfway to her car when the world tilted violently. Pain exploded through her abdomen, and she felt water gush down her legs, warm against the cold rain. Her water had broken. Elena collapsed against the hood of her sedan, trying to remember the breathing exercises from the birthing class Marcus had refused to attend. In through the nose, out through the mouth. But the contractions were coming faster now, barely 2 minutes apart. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not. With shaking hands, she managed to unlock her car and grab her phone from the center console. The screen was wet, her fingers slipping as she tried to dial 911. Before she could press call, a pair of headlights swept across the driveway. A black SUV pulled up behind her car. For one desperate moment, Elena thought Marcus had changed his mind, had realized he couldn't actually leave his wife to give birth alone in a thunderstorm. But it wasn't Marcus who emerged from the SUV. Governor Thomas Morrison stepped out into the rain, his security detail right behind him. At 62, her father still carried himself with the commanding presence that had won him 3 terms as governor and made him a serious contender for the presidency. But now his distinguished features were twisted with fury. Elena? He was at her side in seconds, his suit jacket already soaked. Jesus Christ, what happened? Why are you? He saw the water pooling beneath her, saw the way she was gripping the car hood. Where's Marcus? Elena couldn't speak through the next contraction. She could only point at the darkened house, at the bedroom window where her husband was probably already back in bed with his mistress. Her father's face transformed into something she'd never seen before. Pure, incandescent rage. He turned to his security chief. Daniel, get an ambulance here now. And I want Marcus Harrison brought out of that house in the next 60 seconds, or I'm going in there myself. Sir, we should get Elena to the hospital, the ambulance will take her to the hospital. Governor Morrison's voice was iron. After I have a conversation with the man who just locked his pregnant wife out in a storm. Elena tried to protest, but another wave of pain swallowed her words. Through the haze, she heard her father's security team pounding on the front door, heard the lock finally give way with a sharp crack. Heard Marcus's indignant shouts as he was dragged outside in his expensive pajamas. What the hell do you think you're doing? Marcus demanded. This is private property. I'll have you arrested for, he saw the governor and went pale. Thomas. I didn't know you were. Elena must have called you, playing the victim again. Governor Morrison moved so fast his security detail barely had time to react. One moment he was standing beside Elena's car. The next, he had Marcus slammed against the front door of the house. You locked my daughter out. The governor's voice was deadly quiet. My pregnant daughter. In a thunderstorm. While she was in labor. That's not, she's exaggerating, Marcus's words choked off as the governor's grip tightened. I watched the whole thing from my car. Her father's tone could have frozen fire. I was coming to surprise Elena with dinner, to check on her since she missed our standing appointment. And I sat in that car for 5 minutes, Marcus. I watched my daughter beg you to let her inside her own home. I watched you mock her from a window while your mistress wore my daughter's clothes. I watched you tell her to take a paternity test before you'd acknowledge your own child. Cassandra appeared in the doorway, a silk robe wrapped around her thin frame. Governor Morrison, I think there's been a misunderstanding, you. The governor didn't even look at her. Get out of my sight before I forget that I'm a public servant bound by certain behavioral standards. You can't just, Daniel. The governor addressed his security chief without releasing Marcus. Isn't Ms. Vale the subject of an ongoing investigation by the state attorney general? Something about fraudulent charity solicitations? Cassandra's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Funny. Because I had a very interesting briefing this morning about a woman named Cassandra Vale who's been running a fake nonprofit, claiming to help underprivileged children while pocketing donations. The AG's office has been building a case for 6 months. The governor finally looked at her, and his smile was terrifying. I believe they'll be ready to file charges next week. Unless, of course, they have reason to expedite their timeline. That's a threat, Marcus sputtered. You're threatening us, I'm stating facts. Governor Morrison released Marcus with a sharp shove. Here's another fact, I've spent 30 years in public service. I know every judge, every prosecutor, every journalist in this state. And I've been very patient, very understanding about your marriage to my daughter because she asked me to respect her choices. He glanced back at Elena, who was being helped into the ambulance by paramedics. His expression softened for just a moment before hardening again. But that patience ends the moment you lock my pregnant daughter out in a storm. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus. You're going to sign whatever Elena's attorneys put in front of you. Full custody, generous child support, her name back on that house deed, and a settlement that reflects 3 years of her supporting your career while you were building your little tech empire. The hell I will, or, the governor continued as if Marcus hadn't spoken, I'll make one phone call to the state attorney general about expanding her investigation into Ms. Vale's associates. I wonder what they'd find if they looked closely at Harrison textbooks. Those government contracts you've been so proud of landing, were all the proper procedures followed? Every regulation met? Every disclosure accurate? Marcus's face went from white to gray. You wouldn't. Try me. Governor Morrison stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. You made a mistake tonight, son. A catastrophic one. You showed me exactly what kind of man you are. And now I'm going to show you exactly what happens when someone hurts my little girl. The ambulance's siren cut through the night. Elena was calling for her father, her voice weak with pain and fear. I have to go, the governor said, straightening his tie with practiced ease. My daughter is about to become a mother. But Marcus? When she comes home from the hospital, she'll have full access to this house, all her belongings, and a security detail to ensure you don't pull another stunt like tonight. You have 48 hours to move out. Consider it a gift that I'm giving you any warning at all. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? Congratulations on the baby. I understand you'll be wanting to arrange visitation through the proper legal channels. I'm sure Elena's attorneys will be in touch to discuss supervised visits. After all, we wouldn't want any more incidents where the child's welfare was compromised by poor judgment. Governor Morrison walked back to the ambulance, his demeanor shifting instantly as he climbed in beside Elena. Through the open doors, Marcus could hear him murmuring reassurances, could see him holding his daughter's hand as the vehicle pulled away. Cassandra appeared at Marcus's side, her face pinched with calculation. You need to call your lawyer. He can't just threaten us like that, shut up. Marcus stared at the retreating ambulance, his mind racing through the implications. Governor Thomas Morrison wasn't just Elena's father. He was the most powerful man in the state, with a network of allies that spanned the entire political spectrum. And Marcus had just declared war on him by hurting his daughter. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Daniel Foster, Governor Morrison's chief of security. You have 45 minutes to vacate the premises. Anything remaining after that will be secured until Mrs. Harrison's legal team can arrange retrieval. This is your only warning. Through the bedroom window, Marcus could see his carefully curated life beginning to crumble. The tech magazines that had featured him on their covers, calling him the next great innovator. The investor parties where he'd been the star, his company valued at $40 million. The future he'd imagined with Cassandra, young and uncomplicated and free from the responsibilities he'd been so eager to escape. All of it was about to disappear because he'd been too arrogant to understand one simple truth. Elena Morrison Harrison might have married him as a private citizen, but she was still the daughter of the most powerful man in the state. And he'd just made an enemy who had the resources, the connections, and the motivation to destroy everything Marcus had built. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft sounds of a newborn breathing. Elena held her daughter against her chest, marveling at the tiny perfect face, the rosebud mouth, the delicate fingers that gripped her thumb with surprising strength. "She's beautiful," Governor Morrison said softly from the chair beside the bed. He'd been there for 12 hours, through every contraction, every moment of fear, every push that had finally brought his granddaughter into the world. "Absolutely perfect." "Sophia," Elena whispered, tracing her daughter's cheek. "I want to name her Sophia Margaret, after Mom." Her father's eyes grew bright. "Your mother would have loved that. She would have loved her." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thoughts of the woman they'd lost 5 years ago to cancer. Margaret Morrison had been a force of nature, a political strategist who'd helped her husband rise from state senator to governor while raising Elena to be strong, independent, and uncompromising in her values. "I should have listened to you," Elena said quietly. "When you said Marcus was too focused on his image, too concerned with what people thought. I thought you were just being overprotective. You were in love." Her father reached over to stroke Sophia's downy hair. "And he was charming. Good-looking, successful, seemingly devoted. He fooled a lot of people, Elena. Don't blame yourself for seeing what he wanted you to see." "But I ignored the signs." She felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "The way he started criticizing my clothes, my weight when I got pregnant. How he stopped inviting me to company events. The late nights that became later and later. I knew something was wrong, but I kept telling myself it was just stress from the business, that things would get better after the baby came. Marcus made his choices." Governor Morrison's voice hardened. "And now he gets to live with the consequences." Elena shifted Sophia carefully, wincing at the pain from her emergency C-section. "What you said tonight, about the Attorney General investigating Cassandra, was that true?" "Every word." Her father's smile was grim. "The AG's office has been building a case against her charity for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. They estimate she's stolen nearly $2 million from donors who thought they were helping children. The investigation was supposed to stay quiet until they had enough evidence to guarantee convictions. And now? Now I've asked them to expedite. The governor's daughter being publicly humiliated by a woman under investigation for fraud? That's the kind of story that moves investigations from quiet to front page very quickly." He paused. "I also made some calls about Harrison Tech's government contracts. Turns out Marcus has been very creative with his accounting practices. The kind of creativity that tends to interest the IRS and the SEC." Elena looked down at her sleeping daughter. "I don't want revenge, Dad. I just want to protect Sophia." Protecting Sophia means making sure Marcus understands there are consequences for his actions. The governor stood and moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Elena, I've spent my entire career trying to be fair, to follow the rules, to work within the system. But tonight I watched a man I welcomed into our family humiliate you in the worst possible way. And I realized that sometimes the system needs a little push in the right direction." "What did you do?" "I made sure that every journalist in the state knows what happened tonight. Not through official channels, of course. But certain reporters owe me favors. By tomorrow morning, the story of Marcus Harrison locking his pregnant wife out in a storm will be on every news site, every social media feed, every morning show in the region." He turned back to face her. "And once that story breaks, those government contracts he's so proud of? They'll be reviewed. His investors will start asking questions. His board will panic. Everything he's built will be on the line. And Cassandra will be arrested within 48 hours on fraud charges. The AG's office has been very cooperative. The governor's expression was satisfied. I expect she'll be very interested in making a deal, which means testifying about any financial irregularities she might have witnessed at Harrison Tech. Elena should have felt guilty. She'd been raised to believe in fairness, in due process, in letting the system work as intended. But as she looked at her daughter, at the tiny life that Marcus had been willing to risk for a vacation with his mistress, she felt only a fierce protective fury. He deserves it, she said quietly. He deserves worse. Her father returned to his chair, his expression softening as he looked at his granddaughter. But we'll settle for justice. And for making sure Sophia grows up knowing her mother is strong enough to stand up to anyone who tries to hurt her family. A knock on the door interrupted them. A nurse entered, followed by Elena's lawyer, Patricia Chen. The attorney was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and dressed in a power suit despite the late hour. Governor Morrison, Elena. Patricia nodded to them both. I got your message about wanting to file divorce papers immediately. That fast? Elena asked. I've had them prepared for weeks. Patricia pulled a folder from her briefcase. Elena, I've been your family's attorney for 20 years. I knew Marcus was going to pull something like this eventually. The prenup he insisted on has some interesting loopholes that favor you, especially given tonight's circumstances. Over the next hour, Patricia outlined the divorce strategy. Community property laws, Marcus's financial misconduct, the house deed that had been illegally transferred. Each piece built into a picture of systematic deception and abuse. The prenup states that in cases of abandonment or endangerment, all protective clauses are void, Patricia explained. Marcus's actions tonight, locking you out while in labor, in a storm, with witnesses including the governor himself, constitute both abandonment and endangerment. Which means instead of the 50-50 split he was counting on, you're entitled to pursue full marital assets. How much are we talking about? Governor Morrison asked. Harrison Tech is valued at approximately $40 million. He owns 65% of the shares. The house is worth $2 million. There are investment accounts, stock portfolios, and other assets totaling another $8 million. Patricia consulted her notes. Conservatively, we're looking at a settlement in the range of $25 to $30 million, plus full custody and generous child support. Elena felt dizzy. I don't want his money. I just want to be able to support Sophia. Then take enough to ensure Sophia's future is secure and donate the rest to charity, her father suggested. But don't let Marcus walk away from this thinking his actions don't have consequences. Patricia nodded. There's also the matter of the house. Since Marcus illegally transferred the deed, we can have that reversed fairly easily. But given what happened tonight, I'd recommend you sell it and start fresh somewhere new. Agreed, Elena said immediately. She never wanted to see that house again, never wanted to remember standing in the rain begging her husband for mercy while he planned vacations with his mistress. After Patricia left, Elena tried to rest, but her mind kept circling back to the same question: how had she missed the signs? When had Marcus transformed from the man she'd fallen in love with into someone who could lock out his pregnant wife? Her father must have sensed her thoughts. Elena, you need to stop blaming yourself. Men like Marcus are very good at hiding their true nature until they feel secure enough to show it. But I should have known, you trusted him. That's not a flaw, sweetheart. That's what marriage is supposed to be built on. He reached over and took her hand. Your mother and I raised you to see the best in people, to believe in love and commitment. Marcus took advantage of those qualities, but that doesn't mean they're weaknesses. It feels like weakness right now. Because you're hurt and tired and you've just been through hell. The governor squeezed her hand. But you survived, Elena. You're here, Sophia is healthy, and you're going to build a beautiful life for both of you. That's not weakness. That's strength. A text message interrupted them. Governor Morrison checked his phone and smiled grimly. The story just broke. Channel 7 is running it as their lead. Tech millionaire locks pregnant wife out during labor, governor's daughter gives birth after storm ordeal. He showed Elena the screen. The article included a photo of Marcus's house, a statement from Daniel Foster describing what he'd witnessed, and quotes from unnamed sources about the governor's fury. Within minutes, Elena's phone began buzzing with messages from friends, family, and people she barely knew, all expressing shock and outrage. "Let me handle the press," her father said, silencing both their phones. "You focus on recovering and bonding with Sophia. Everything else can wait." But everything else couldn't wait. Within hours, the story exploded across social media. #LockHerOut was trending nationally. Women's advocacy groups were calling for boycotts of Harrison tech investors were demanding explanations. And Marcus's carefully curated public image was crumbling under the weight of universal condemnation. By morning, Elena's hospital room was filled with flowers from well-wishers and gifts for Sophia from people she'd never met. The story had touched a nerve, resonating with anyone who'd ever felt discarded or betrayed by someone they trusted. Governor Morrison handled the press conference himself, standing at a podium outside the hospital with the morning sun highlighting the exhaustion on his face. "Last night, I witnessed something that no father should ever have to see," he began, his voice steady but filled with barely controlled fury. "I watched my daughter, 9 months pregnant and in labor, beg her husband to let her into their home. I watched him refuse from a bedroom window while his mistress mocked her. I watched my daughter nearly give birth in a thunderstorm because the man who promised to love and protect her decided a vacation with his girlfriend was more important than his child's safety." The reporters erupted with questions. Governor Morrison held up a hand for silence. "I'm not here as a politician today. I'm here as a father, as a grandfather, and as a man who believes that actions should have consequences." He looked directly into the cameras. Marcus Harrison made choices last night that revealed his true character. "And I want every person watching this to understand something. My daughter is strong, she is brave, and she will not be defined by one man's cruelty. She is a survivor, a mother, and a woman who deserves so much better than what she received from the man she trusted with her heart." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the crowd. "As for Mr. Harrison's business dealings and the activities of his associates, I have full confidence that the appropriate authorities will conduct thorough investigations and take whatever actions are warranted by the facts. That's all I have to say." As Governor Morrison walked away from the podium, refusing to take further questions, Elena watched the press conference on the hospital television. She saw her father's controlled fury, heard the steel in his voice, and felt something shift inside her chest. For 3 years, she'd tried to make herself smaller to accommodate Marcus's ego. She'd apologized when he criticized her, had changed her appearance to meet his standards, had suppressed her own ambitions to support his. She'd convinced herself that love meant sacrifice, that marriage meant compromise. But watching her father defend her with the full weight of his office and influence, Elena realized she'd confused love with subjugation. Real love didn't require her to diminish herself. Real partnership didn't mean accepting cruelty in the name of keeping peace. Sophia stirred against her chest, making small sounds of hunger. As Elena began to nurse her daughter, she made a silent promise: Sophia would grow up knowing her worth, knowing she deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. She would never watch her mother accept less than she deserved from a man who claimed to love her. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her finger hesitated over the delete button, then curiosity won out. The message was from Marcus. "Elena, we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand. I never meant for any of this to happen. Please call me so we can discuss this rationally." She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. There was nothing rational to discuss with a man who'd locked her out during labor. Nothing he could say that would undo the moment she'd stood in the rain begging for mercy while he planned vacations with another woman. Another text came through, this one from Patricia Chen. "Marcus's attorney just called. They want to negotiate a settlement. He's offering full custody and 60% of assets. He's panicking." Elena typed back, "Tell him we'll see him in court." She wouldn't make this easy for Marcus. He'd made his choices, had prioritized his comfort over his wife's safety and his unborn child's well-being. Now he could face the consequences in front of a judge, with the whole world watching. 3 days later, Elena was released from the hospital with Sophia bundled in her arms and her father's security detail flanking them on all sides. The press was waiting outside, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Governor Morrison held up his hand for quiet. "My daughter would like to make a brief statement." Elena had practiced this moment, had rehearsed the words until they felt natural. But standing in front of the cameras with Sophia in her arms, she felt her carefully prepared speech dissolve. "I want to thank everyone who has reached out with support over the past few days," she began, her voice stronger than she'd expected. "Your kind words and prayers have meant more to me than I can express. To the women who have shared their own stories of betrayal and survival, I see you. I hear you. And I want you to know that we are not defined by the men who hurt us." She adjusted Sophia in her arms, and the cameras caught the movement, the tender way she cradled her daughter. "This is Sophia Margaret Harrison. She is 3 days old, healthy, and loved beyond measure. She will grow up knowing that her mother was strong enough to stand up for herself and for her child. That's the legacy I want to leave her." Elena looked directly into the cameras, knowing Marcus would be watching. "To anyone who thinks they can treat another human being with cruelty and walk away without consequences, you're wrong. Actions matter. Character matters. And the truth will always come out eventually." She turned and walked toward the waiting car, her father's hand on her back, his security detail creating a buffer between her and the press. As they drove away, Elena caught a glimpse of herself in the car window. 3 days ago, she'd been a woman broken by betrayal, sobbing in the rain outside a locked door. Now she was a mother, a survivor, and a woman who'd discovered she was stronger than she'd ever known. The car pulled up to a house Elena didn't recognize, a beautiful brownstone in one of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods. Governor Morrison helped her out of the vehicle, a satisfied smile on his face. "What is this?" Elena asked. "This is your fresh start." Her father gestured to the house. "I bought it yesterday. 5 bedrooms, a nursery already set up, top-of-the-line security, and a live-in nanny when you're ready to go back to work. Consider it a gift from Sophia's grandfather." Elena felt tears threaten. "Dad, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He squeezed her shoulder. "You're my daughter, Elena. And I will do whatever it takes to make sure you and Sophia are safe, comfortable, and happy. That's what family does." As they walked through the beautifully furnished rooms, Elena felt the last pieces of her old life falling away. The house she'd shared with Marcus, the carefully curated existence she'd tried so hard to maintain, all of it belonged to someone else now. Someone who'd been willing to accept less than she deserved in the name of love. This house, this new beginning, belonged to the woman she was becoming. Strong, independent, and unafraid to demand better. Marcus Harrison sat in his attorney's office, reading through the financial reports with growing horror. In 3 days, his carefully constructed empire had begun to crumble. Harrison Tech's stock price had dropped 40% since the story broke. 3 major investors had pulled their backing, citing concerns about the company's leadership. 2 government contracts were under review, with strong indications they'd be cancelled. His board of directors had called an emergency meeting to discuss removing him as CEO. And Cassandra had been arrested that morning on fraud charges, let out of her apartment in handcuffs while news cameras captured every moment. "This is a disaster," Marcus said quietly. "How did this happen so fast?" His attorney, Robert Walsh, looked at him with barely concealed contempt. "You locked the governor's pregnant daughter out of her house during a thunderstorm while she was in labor. What did you think would happen?" I don't know what I thought." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "It was supposed to be a clean break. Elena was supposed to accept the settlement, take some money, and we'd all move on. Instead, you humiliated her publicly, endangered her life and your child's life, and gave Governor Morrison every reason to use his considerable influence against you." Robert spread the legal documents across his desk. "The AG's office expedited Cassandra's investigation because of you. The IRS is auditing Harrison Tech because of you. Your investors are fleeing because of you. This isn't Elena's fault, Marcus. This is entirely on you. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to claim this was an overreaction, that he'd been unfairly targeted. But he'd watched the footage from that night. Daniel Foster's body camera had captured everything. Him at the window, dismissive and cruel. Elena sobbing in the rain, clutching her stomach. Cassandra's mocking voice calling down. The video had been leaked to the press. 8 million views in 24 hours. Every news outlet was playing it on a loop. Marcus Harrison, tech genius and millionaire, revealed as a man who could watch his wife beg for help and respond with mockery. What are my options? Marcus asked. Limited. Robert was blunt. Elena's attorney is excellent, and they have a case that any jury would find sympathetic. Woman abandoned while in labor? By a wealthy husband who was cheating with a con artist. Marcus, you couldn't design worse optics if you tried. So I just give her everything she wants? You give her what she deserves and hope she's merciful. Robert leaned forward. Because if this goes to court, Elena will get primary custody, generous child support, and a significant portion of your assets. The prenup is void due to abandonment and endangerment. And with Governor Morrison backing her with every resource at his disposal, you're fighting a losing battle. Marcus thought about Cassandra, about the future they'd planned. 2 weeks in Cabo had seemed like the perfect way to start their new life together. Instead, she was sitting in jail, and Marcus was watching his company implode. I need to talk to Elena, he said. If I could just explain what? That you didn't mean to lock her out? That you didn't mean to prioritize your vacation over your child's birth? Robert shook his head. Marcus, Elena isn't interested in explanations. She's interested in protecting her daughter from a man who has demonstrated spectacularly poor judgment. His phone buzzed. Another news alert: Harrison Tech loses third major contract amid scandal. Marcus read the article, feeling the walls close in. His company, his reputation, his future, everything was crumbling because of one night, one decision, one moment of cruelty. What about Cassandra? Marcus asked. Can we help her somehow? Get her a good attorney? Robert gave him a look of pure disbelief. Marcus, Cassandra stole $2 million from charity donors. She's facing federal fraud charges. And right now, the only leverage she has is testimony about any financial irregularities she might have witnessed at Harrison Tech. Do you really want to tie yourself closer to her? She's my girlfriend. She's a con artist who saw you as a mark. Robert was merciless. The DA's office has evidence that Cassandra specifically targeted wealthy men going through midlife crises. You weren't her first victim, Marcus. You were just the richest. The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus thought about all the things Cassandra had said, how she'd made him feel young and alive. How she'd encouraged him to take risks, to live boldly, to cast off the boring stability of his marriage for something more exciting. She'd been playing him. All of it, the adoration, the excitement, the promises of a new beginning, had been calculated manipulation from a woman who saw him as nothing more than a source of money and status. I've been such a fool, Marcus whispered. Yes, Robert agreed. And now you get to pay for it. The question is whether you'll make it worse by fighting, or whether you'll accept responsibility and try to salvage what's left of your reputation. Marcus stared out the window at the city he thought he'd conquered. 3 years ago, he'd been on top of the world, successful company, beautiful wife, unlimited potential. Now he was facing financial ruin, public humiliation, and the knowledge that he'd thrown away the only real thing he'd ever had. For what? For a woman who'd been using him. For a feeling of youth that was nothing but midlife desperation. For an ego that couldn't accept the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood. Draw up the settlement papers, Marcus said quietly. Full custody to Elena, generous child support, and 70% of the assets. Robert raised an eyebrow. That's more than her attorney is asking for. I know. Marcus turned away from the window. But maybe if I do right by Elena and Sophia now, there's a chance, however small, that my daughter won't grow up hating me completely. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't even close to making up for what he'd done. But it was a start. A first step toward becoming the kind of man who deserved to be called a father. Even if it was too late to be the kind of man who deserved to be called a husband. 6 months later, Elena stood in her new home office, reviewing architectural plans for the community center she was building with the settlement money. The Elena Morrison Center for Women and Children would provide emergency housing, legal services, and job training for women leaving abusive situations. Sophia was napping in the nursery upstairs, watched over by the nanny Governor Morrison had insisted on hiring. But Elena had discovered she didn't need as much help as she'd expected. Being a mother had awakened something fierce and capable in her, a strength she'd never known she possessed. Her phone rang. Patricia Chen's number. "Elena, I have news." "Good news, I hope?" Marcus signed the final settlement papers. "Full custody to you, child support set at $15,000 monthly, 70% of assets, which came to $28 million, and a trust fund for Sophia worth another $5 million. Patricia's voice was satisfied. He also signed away any rights to make decisions about Sophia's upbringing without your explicit consent. You have complete control. Elena let the information wash over her. The money would secure Sophia's future, would fund the community center, would ensure they'd never be vulnerable the way she'd been that night in the rain. But the real victory wasn't the settlement. It was the fact that she'd survived, had rebuilt, had become stronger in the places where she'd been broken. "What about Harrison Tech?" Elena asked. "On the verge of bankruptcy. The government contract cancellations triggered an investor panic. Marcus is facing a hostile takeover from a consortium that includes, rather ironically, several companies where your father has connections." Patricia paused. "He's lost everything, Elena. His company, his reputation, his freedom. Cassandra's testimony led to fraud charges against him as well." Elena should have felt triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. And Cassandra? Accepted a plea deal. 7 years federal prison in exchange for testimony against Marcus and several other men she defrauded. Patricia's tone was matter-of-fact. The DA estimates she stole nearly $5 million total from various victims. Marcus was just the most recent. They talked for a few more minutes about details and paperwork, then Patricia signed off. Elena stood at the window, looking out at the tree-lined street where Sophia would grow up safe and protected. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Dinner tonight? I want to see my granddaughter." Elena smiled and typed back, "Perfect. 7 p.m.? As she put down the phone, Sophia's cry came through the baby monitor. Elena climbed the stairs to the nursery, finding her daughter awake and demanding attention with the fierce insistence of a 6-month-old who knew exactly what she wanted. "Hello, beautiful girl," Elena murmured, lifting Sophia from her crib. The baby's face broke into a wide smile, and Elena felt her heart expand with love so intense it was almost painful. This, she thought, was what love was supposed to feel like. Unconditional, uncomplicated, free from the need to diminish herself to make space for someone else's ego. Marcus had taught her that lesson the hardest way possible. But Elena had learned it, had survived it, and had emerged on the other side as someone Sophia could be proud of. That night, over dinner at the governor's mansion, Elena watched her father play with Sophia, making silly faces that sent the baby into peals of laughter. She thought about her mother, about the lessons Margaret Morrison had tried to teach her about strength and self-worth. "I wish Mom could see her," Elena said quietly. Governor Morrison looked up, his expression tender. "She does, sweetheart. And she's proud of you. So proud. I should have listened to you both. About Marcus, about everything. You were in love. Love makes us willing to overlook things we shouldn't." He settled Sophia against his shoulder, patting her back gently. "But you didn't let that love destroy you, Elena. When it mattered most, you chose yourself and your daughter. That's the lesson your mother wanted you to learn." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being family. Eventually, the governor spoke again. I had an interesting conversation with the Democratic National Committee yesterday. Elena looked up. About what? About the next presidential election. He smiled slightly. They think having a sitting governor with a compelling personal narrative might resonate with voters. Particularly voters who care about family values and protecting the vulnerable. They want you to run for president? They want me to consider it. Governor Morrison's expression was thoughtful. I told them I'd need time to think about it, to discuss it with my family. Elena felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. What do you want to do? I want to make sure you and Sophia are settled first. He looked at his granddaughter, his expression soft. You two are my priority. Everything else is secondary. Dad, you've been working toward this your entire career. Don't let what happened with Marcus hold you back. It's not about Marcus. The governor met her eyes. It's about being there for you and Sophia. Being the father and grandfather you both deserve. Elena felt tears threaten. For so long, she thought love meant sacrifice, meant putting others first at the cost of yourself. But watching her father with Sophia, seeing his devotion to their well-being, she understood that real love was about support, not subjugation. About lifting each other up, not tearing each other down. We'll be fine, Dad. Better than fine. She reached over to squeeze his hand. And if you want to run for president, Sophia and I will be right there with you. Your daughter and granddaughter, showing the country what real family values look like. Governor Morrison smiled, and in that moment, Elena saw the future spreading out before them. Not the future she'd planned with Marcus, full of compromises and diminishment. But a better future, one where she and Sophia were surrounded by love and support and the knowledge that they deserved nothing less than complete respect. Marcus Harrison had locked her out that night, thinking he was discarding someone with no power, no resources, no options. Instead, he'd awakened a woman who'd forgotten her own strength, who'd discovered that being underestimated was just another form of power. And as Elena sat with her father and daughter in the home where she'd grown up, she realized that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. Strong. Unafraid. And completely unwilling to accept less than she deserved ever again.